Pizza coma. We could just all lie and say we went to this talk and take a nap. Who's for that? Sorry, you're stuck. I did new slides last night, so I took it out of Prezi for all of you who get motion sick. I thought that would be super terrible on the super big screen, so you're welcome. I like Prezi, but it does sort of induce some vertigo. So, SearchFirst writing for non-writers. How many of you are technical writers? There you go. One sort of half-hearted wave. That's what I figured. So let me tell you why you need to write documents, since obviously that's not what you do all the time. You need to write documents because people have an emotional relationship with their software. I have an emotional relationship with my software much more than my car. Like, my car doesn't run, I'm just like, somebody else is going to fix that. My software doesn't work, and I'm like, gone! Because I need it to work to do my job. So, when my software doesn't work, I feel sad and frustrated and what I call sad-mad. This is an emotion that a lot of children have, and I don't think we actually grow out of it sad-mad. So, okay, I have a problem. I got an error code. I guess I have to search for the answer. So, you get your search results. They come in 4 varieties. The first one is, yay, it worked. Whatever I found, it fixed my problem. It turns out that you need, JavaScript to run that HTML for no apparent reason, but that's what you need and it works. Or you get too many answers and you can't evaluate whether or not that's how they're supposed to work. Or you get an answer that doesn't work. That's really disappointing. You're like, I tried it and it doesn't work. Now I have to go back and try the whole searching process all over again. Or, worst of all, you get the answer that breaks your system. You're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to install this new mod. It's going to be super. My kerbals will be so happy. And then, like, flaming death. Because, as near as I can tell, kerbals are always on the verge of flaming death. It's a really great game if you haven't played it, Kerbal Space Program. So, you're like, why should I write documentation? I'm busy, but you're doing nothing. You're making an affirmative choice not to write documentation. Your choice is affecting your users. So you're like, but I'm a developer, or something else that's like development that I never remember, like architect. It's a lot like developer. You're like, I'm not a writer. Number one, I don't have time. I have a product to write. I have things to do. There are meetings to go to. I have things to do. Your product is useless if it is unusable. If you do not have documentation that lets somebody install your product, you don't actually have a product, you have a code repository. It's like a product, but it doesn't make you any money. So if people cannot figure out how to install or use your product, it's useless. Maybe that's a reason to write documentation. Your time is multiplied when you write documentation. Every time you write something that saves someone 5 minutes, you're not saving 5 minutes, you're saving 5 minutes times the number of users who have ever had that problem. Like, your user base multiplies this time, so you're like, well, it's going to take me 4 hours to fix, but if it saves an hour for every user, it's hundreds and hundreds of hours. So you do have time because it's worth it to your users. The time is already wasted. This is a parody. I really like, see the lightsaber? It's a good one. Your time is already wasted if you're answering questions repetitively, or if your customer support is answering questions repetitively. Like, oh, this is the 16th call we've gotten today for the fact that our documentation is broken and our software doesn't work the way people think it does. Somebody's time is already wasted because they're frustrated. So, but I don't have resources. I'm just a single person, or I'm working with a really small team, or I can't imagine how I would know how to do that. You are a resource. Like, if nothing else, if you can't bring yourself to face the blank piece of paper and write it down, record a podcast about it. Type it into Twitter if that's what it takes, but you are the resource that knows the most about this product, and you have to tell other people how it works. So it's not that some external force magically creates documentation. You are the resource they use to do that. You don't need any fancy software. I personally have fancy software preferences. I really like a $1,000 piece of software called Madcap Flare. It's super awesome and super nerdy, and if you don't have it, you can't really read documents that come from it. But GitHub has a wiki built into it. So if you're checking anything in, you might as well just check in a few documents about how it works. You know, your little README file, your little wiki. It doesn't have to be fancy to be super effective. You don't need a community manager. I love community managers. I think they are the most awesome thing ever. I think it really affects how a community feels about software, especially about development tools. Like, I am pro community managers for development tools, but you don't need them because what they do is what we hope that we all do, and that's tell you why this software is going to solve your problem. Nobody actually wants to buy software. Nobody wants to actually hire someone. They want their problem solved, and that's just the most effective way they can think of doing it. I say this all the time about writing cover letters, that you don't want to tell them how awesome you are. You want to tell them how screwed they are and how you can fix it. It's a much more compelling story. And then you don't have to brag about yourself as much, which I hate. So, but I don't have experience. I flunked essay writing in 4th grade, and I've never looked back at the English language. I have trauma about, paragraphs. It's terrible. I don't have expertise in writing. So I'm going to tell you a couple things you can do that are going to make it much easier to write, because I'm a technical writer and I like to teach people things. You have here a bell curve. It's not a normalized bell curve, it's sort of a pointy bell curve. This is what we call low-hanging fruit. This is the thing that people call about most often. This is the one problem that if you fixed it, 50% of your call volume or email complaints or bug reports would go away. It may be hard to fix. It may be programmatically difficult, so you can at least write about how to work around it. And if you fix that, then you've made a lot of people happy. A lot of us kind of like to fix these. We're like, wow, this is really obscure, and I just spent 5 hours figuring it out. I'm going to document this one. Well, go ahead, but it's only going to help the 2 people who are actually using that. Fix the one in the middle. You are not competing with no information. You are competing with wrong information. And the wrong information looks like this. It looks like, Bill said this was really hard to install. And it looks like, well, on Stack Overflow I read that. And it looks like spam that offers to install your stuff for you and is actually, or spam, malware. Like, I don't want my customers downloading malware because they're trying to get my product to work. I've done that. There was an email incident several years ago, email encryption. It was not good. But I was trying to work around an absence of documentation. So, here are the bare minimums for writing documentation. And I'm going to distribute these slides, but if you remember nothing else, this is how you can make usable documentation. It has to be human readable. You remember how I said I really love this piece of software that turned out a database that makes it really hard to read? Don't do that. This is only for professionals. Whatever you do should be human readable. It should be HTML. It should be Markdown. It should be something that somebody can look at and see how to fix and improve. It should have good indexing, and we're going to get into that later, but did you know that, nope, I don't know, I forgot the name, Cat's Cradle. The author is Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut was a working technical writer for his entire life. And there's this beautiful passage in Cat's Cradle about being on the plane with a pair of indexers, and they go on and on about the art and science of indexing. And that's evidently the part of the book that I really retained. Indexing is a magical way to find things. It should have simple instructions. If your procedure is 20 steps long, then probably it is more than one procedure. You should say, installing the server and configuring the server. Oh, look, now it's 2 10-step procedures. If you overwhelm people, they get lost somewhere in the middle and they don't know where they failed. You should have success tests. So when you say, hey, we're going to install a server, then you should be able to say, ping the server, here's the command. Because if you give people success tests, they know they've successfully completed one step of the documentation, and then they're not lost, like at step 25, did I get the web service up? Did I get the web server up? I don't know what's wrong. Makes troubleshooting a lot easier. And you should give people next steps, like, yay, you got your web services up. Now you are going to. Because if you just drop them at the end of a procedure, they don't know what the next thing is, and they skip things that are going to make something work. So, the bare minimums. And then the no-nos. Edna Mode says, no capes, from The Incredibles. She did not like them because they were frivolous and dangerous. And I have similar feelings about these points. No images that replace words. You can't localize them. You can't read them with a screen reader. You can't update them effectively. Images are a really dangerous thing to put in your documentation, and unless they're conceptual, I will fight you about it. Like, no, we're not putting that screen capture in. No firewalls or barriers for people or spiders or robots. If you're going to go to the trouble of writing documentation, oh my God, you lost the coin toss, you have to write documentation, don't hide it. Like, let people read it. No one's going to reverse engineer your miraculous thing from some user documentation on how to install it, or even how to use it. Don't put up any barriers between your stuff and the world. And I don't really like screencast and YouTube for instructional things. I think it's really disrespectful of people's time. It says, I think that you can sit still and listen and watch this for like 10 minutes even, and I don't always have that kind of time to learn something, and I just want to skim through to the 2 steps I don't understand. So there are some things that it's super useful for. I find it really great for sewing techniques, but I don't think in technology it's as useful as written documentation. That said, my 12-year-old has learned so much Linux from watching YouTube. I don't understand how this works, but it's a true thing. So, how are you going to do this? Now we are going to go through the history of technical writing. I promise I'll make this as painless as possible. From about 1980 to about 1998, we're doing what I call descriptive documentation. So look at my screen. It has buttons on it. You can click the buttons. If you click the save button, your document will save. We have this lemming-like urge to document interfaces the way they appear to us because it's so easy to do, but it has no context. It doesn't give you like why you want to save or how often you want to save or even like what any of the other buttons are actually meant to do. The API version of this is, here are the calls and values. Look, I've documented the API. Well, yeah, you have, but you haven't given anybody context for how the calls work together. And you haven't given them any context for like, wow, it would be really great if you authenticated the user before you tried to do a call. You've just sort of dropped this pile of knowledge on them without giving them a way to use it. The internal version, and I do this, so I'm guilty of it, is I left the code here. I left it in the shared drive. Have fun with that. Have you ever walked into that situation where the last developer was like, yeah, it's all checked in? And you're like, what were you doing with it? What was the plan? What was the project? Why did you name it foobar? So these contextless drops of information are almost as bad as not having the information at all. I will say, I love READMEs. READMEs should be an exceptional, like, sparkly thing, because those are the things that get you up and running, and they are just a data drop. They don't have any context, like, here's how you get started. But in conclusion, descriptive documentation, don't do it. No. So, next comes 1998 to, say, 2011, what we call task-based documentation. It's very object-oriented technical writing. So, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to turn on the server. Here's how you do it. You have turned on the server. And then you link these small tasks into big assemblies, like, I want to start a server on Amazon. Okay. But they're sadly limited in that they don't have much context, again, and they don't have a lot of back-end data. They're like, you can't have a task-based document on how to use an API. That's not a real thing that works. Like, I have these jumpers that I need to set. Well, I could tell you how to do it, but you kind of need a reference document for how it's supposed to look. So task-based documentation is pretty good. It's much better than descriptive documentation, but it's not perfect. About 2011, I started noting something that I called guerrilla documentation. And this is what happens when you abandon people without their documentation. They'll do it themselves. Guerrilla documentation is Stack Overflow and server fault and user forums. And sometimes it's great because people have written in really super specific questions and then you get answers to them. It's super. But even though it's fast and responsive, it is out of your control and it is out of your ecosystem and it goes stale. So the answer may have been super for version 10, and now you're on version 11 and it doesn't work that way at all, but people are still trying to do it because whoever answered the question didn't say this is version 10. And it's still the top search hit when you search on that error. So it could be wrong. Here's what you do with it. You steal it back. Hi, that was a great answer. I'm so happy to see it. I'd love to send you a t-shirt, and can we use that in our documentation? Don't rewrite it. Just like, well, I mean, maybe massage it a little, but like steal it back. Somebody else has already solved that problem for you. FrameMaker did this super well. There was, for years and years, a mailing list called Framers L, which had to do with basically everything that could ever go wrong with FrameMaker, which was software that was Unix-based in 1980, and I was still using it in 2013, and it had gotten a little crufty, just a little. But you could ask these people anything, and they would know, like secret commands that didn't exist in the documentation anywhere, they would know it. And Adobe hosted that, and they gave people rewards for answering often, and then they didn't have to do nearly as much support because the answers were already there. And when you see an outside answer that's super good, you're like, wow, somebody on Stack Overflow answered that in a way that I wish I had thought to do. You respond to it and say, that's a super answer. For more great answers like this, go see our documentation at link. That would be a great way to use outside documentation. Guerrilla documentation is amazing and cool, but not sufficient. So I want to talk to you about my invention, or something. I call it SearchFirst Documentation, and it's based on the idea that whenever you're mad at your software, you Google the answer. And if you keep analytics on your page, you will know what searches are getting people to your page. You will know what people are searching on if they're finding you. So, from now on, I think we should all use SearchFirst Documentation. I think we should plan our documentation based on what our users are asking for in their searches. It's responsive to actual user needs instead of like hypothetical user. Like, I imagine that people will want to know how to reset the footer in their email. Nobody wants to know that. It needs to be lightweight and editable by anyone because you want to have people feel like they can make inputs into it. You can't have it walled off internally any more than you can externally. Like I said before, it needs to be discoverable and open. People need to be able to get to it, and it needs to be responsive to searches. Like, search engine optimization isn't just for selling things. Search engine optimization is for finding things. And the thing you want them to find is answers because they're still angry their software doesn't work. So, the thing that makes searches work is indexing or tagging. But I come out of a tradition that thinks of it as indexing. So how do you do indexing on no time and no money? I think of this as, you know the little tag clouds, they're so cute, white background, right? I want a thunderstorm of tag clouds. I want you to have so many relevant tags that anybody can find you. But the problem is, you think of your software in one way and they think of it in another. And you have to figure out how they're thinking of it. So, somebody give me a kind of software, like a software product that you use. Word processor. Okay, so we think of this as a word processor. And what else might we think of it as? It's a word processor. We write with it. Might be a writing tool. Might be a documentation tool. Yet, documentation viewing. To-do list. Word art. Like these are all things that people use word processors for. Layout. Graphic manipulation. Brochures, right? So I didn't think of those right off the bat because I'm like, this is our word processor. It processes words. You have to look at the environment and your competitors and your trade magazines and whatever else is out there to build an effective tag cloud so that people will find what they're looking for because they don't all use the same words you do. When I was a wee baby technical writer, I got a temp job working with HTML. Like I said, I learned this 20 years ago. It changed my life. And my temp job was writing in meta tags and HTML documents for Billy Graham International, which was, at least I didn't have to go to chapel because I was a temp. But it made me start thinking about what would eventually become this search-oriented world, because what we're trying to do is attract people to our pages by the tags. We've done a lot of things to search engines to make them reject stupid, obvious meta tag trolling, but your links are your index entries. Everybody categorizes your links, and if you use useful links instead of link here, you say like word processing tips. Well, that's going to bump you up on the SEO list because it has the words word processing, and that's what they searched on. So think about your links as a really useful meta tag for how to get people into your documentation. So, all right, I know I'm telling you to do a lot of things. It's super overwhelming. But look, I made a little list. Actionable items. Find the user's pain points. What are they suffering from? What are they searching on? What are they complaining about? What hurts? Decide if you're going to fix this through code or documentation. Lots of times you need to say, wow, that interface is really terrible, and we should just fix that so it stops being terrible. But sometimes you can't fix it, or you don't have time to fix it, or the fix is actually stupid and they're just cheddarheads. And you need to answer their question without making your software conform to the whims of cheddarheads. Use your bell curve. Figure out, find the pain point and solve it. Make it discoverable. I want you to be able to search it. Add a tag cloud or index. That doesn't actually mean you need to build a tag cloud. It means you need to have tagging turned on your WordPress. It means you need to have these words in your pages prominently in the headings, in the links. You need to make it a regular activity to update your documentation. I want someone to build me a wiki tool that fades things out after a year. Like after a year, it starts to go grayer and grayer and grayer because it's old data. I think that would be super useful. And let people help. Like lots of people are looking for a way to contribute that isn't as intimidating as trying to write a code module. Let them help and contribute to documentation. So that is the end of my set documentation. How much time do I have left? 5 minutes. Pick one. I'm willing to talk about any of these, but we're going to have to. Okay, yes, go. How do I write conference proposals? Okay, the first thing is, it is not my job to figure out if I'm right for the conference. It is not my job to say, oh, I can't submit too many times. I can't turn in 3 talks to one conference, right? It is my job to give the conference organizers more to work with. What they really want to do is pick a great range of talks, but you can't know what other talks are in there. So all you can do is say, these are the things that I feel like I would be willing to write a talk on, because I don't usually write a talk until I've been accepted to a conference. Once in a while, I'll give a talk again. This is actually a talk I've given before. And then you need to give it a good title, like spend a lot of time meditating on this, and write up a synopsis that says, here's what I'm going to talk about, here's the people it's going to serve, here is what they are going to walk out knowing. Because if you're like, I think I'm going to investigate the possibilities of man-in-the-moon marigolds and also JSON, then the conference organizer doesn't know what their attendees are going to get out of it. If you say, I'm going to teach you how to make MIDI music using Python, then you know what you're getting into, and the organizer can decide based on that. Do you guys have any questions about that? Be brave. The worst thing that happens is you end up standing in front of a bunch of friendly people who look confused and slightly dazed by pizza. You want how to write a help topic, and you want how to write a help topic, and I have 2 minutes left, right? Oh, and also hair. $110 to... Oh, all right. Okay, no, that's fine. I'm having real trouble keeping track of the time, so I apologize too. How to write a help topic. So, I see you. How to write a help topic. You need to figure out what your person is trying to do and why. The interesting thing is that when we're asked to write a help topic, we sort of do the help topic version of descriptive documentation. Like, this is how you make the thing go. Like, do you have one in mind? Like a help topic you're stuck on? What are you doing this week at work? How to set up this replication system. Okay, first of all, that's not a topic. That is a chapter. Yeah. And what you need to do is say, here, how to install the dependencies. Okay, so first of all, I expect you to have this level of platform. And then you say, here is how to get the things you need to do your task. Here's how to implement them. Here's how to know you did it. It's a lot like a recipe. If you think about it, it's like gather all your ingredients, your eggs and your butter, cream the butter and eggs, and then add the flour, and then bake it at 350. So you're assembling this process, but first you have to give them the goal and the ingredients and then the steps. Does that make sense? All right, how do I get my hair this awesome? I bleached the heck out of it. I have a person who does this for me, let's be clear, because I am a pampered technologist. We bleach it for about 45 minutes until it is almost white, and then we put, I think we're using ion hair color right now, and that goes on for like 20, 30 minutes with some heat, and then we wash it out, and then I oil it every day so that it looks shiny, which is... What oil? Mannoy oil, because if you use the what's the popular one everybody's using? The Moroccan oil. It has a golden tint, which is terrible for cool colors. It's an important, the mannoy oil is really good. The macadamia nut oil is also okay. Argan oil, that's, yeah. You had one? No, okay, back to you. Okay. Okay, so the question is, it's super frustrating when you think you're following a link to instructions and you actually get dumped on somebody's website, and then you have to search again to get through the website to get the answer you wanted. And how do we encourage people to do that? We use analytics to watch how many people bounce off when they've come in on a specific URL and they hit the main page and they're like, screw it, I'm going somewhere else that'll actually give me the information. Analytics are totally the tool of the writing future, and you can't be entirely driven by them, but you can certainly use them to make your arguments for best practices. Is there, not that I'm not going to call on you, but is there anybody else we should pay attention to? Okay, go ahead.
So, any advice on resolving the follow instructions? This is the basic problem that I have is I find anytime I give users anything that involves more than about 5 steps, odds are they'll skip step number 2 and do steps 3 and 4 out of 3.
That's true. Okay. So how to solve the PEBCAC problem? The problem exists between chair and keyboard. It's a very old...
Because in context, I'm often writing instructions for doing stuff on servers that is not reversible.
Oh, how exciting.
So the failure case is failure indeed.
All right, so if you don't follow the instructions accurately and in every step, you have just nuked your server, and it's super embarrassing. So, wow, I'm really sorry you have those users, because you would think that once would be enough to teach them. It never is. Like, I'm just like, my condolences to you for having these users, because that seems super troublesome. I think that what I would do is not give them steps 3 and 4 until they'd passed a test that told me they'd done step 2. Like, step 1, step 2, test. Step 3, step 4, test. And the test can be something simple. It isn't like, we're going to run our testing suite. It's like, ping, are you there? Okay. Now taking that information, plug it into step 3. Because if what's happening is they're losing focus, or they think they know more than you do, which is almost certainly the problem, because users, they're charming. So if you give them a direction and you say, well, what was your ping response? Then they have to go, I didn't try the ping. It was so hopefully shame. like if you give it something super stupid and they still can't accomplish this, then they will become aware that they are circumventing your safeguards. Yeah, I mean, like, type in ping the IP address that they should be able to hit the server at. What is your response? So it would be cool if documentation were that interactive. I've seen some things that are that cool, but mostly it's like people still print things out so they can set their coffee mugs on them. And I just accept that. I'm like, we have 2 screens now in the world. You could put one, but no. Coffee mugs. It's very comforting for some people. All right, I saw, yes. Oh, I saved customer support 100 minutes a day because they had the worst form in the world. So I started a job, and I said, please let me sit with customer support for a week, because they know what's going on. They really understand what's going on. And they're like, well, but you're in development. Like, they don't have cooties. They might have had cooties. There were a lot of women. Who knows? So I sat with customer support, and one of the things they had me do was we were working with Medicare data, and what you would do to get a provider number is fax a form to someone, have them hand fill out the form, and fax it back to you. And the line was like this big. It was like a 12-point line. And I'm like, that's kind of terrible, especially once you've faxed it. You get a large degradation of handwriting. Like, faxes don't actually handle handwriting very well. Also, it's 2013. Pry your fingers off the fax machine, please. But we needed these numbers, and then after they got the numbers back from fax machines, they entered them into a database. So not only is there the running to the fax machine and back, there's a data entry element. You want to guess how accurate this was? Not very. And then they'd run the thing and it wouldn't go through, and they had to try and decide if they'd misentered it, or if they'd mistranscribed it, or if the other end had mistranscribed it, because these are 10-digit numbers. It's a lot to get right, actually. Like, we have trouble with that many numbers. So what I did was created a PDF form. This took me half an hour, that you could send and receive back and extract the data from and put it in the database without anyone ever retyping it or even copying and pasting it. And I said, okay, so we have, I think it was at that time, 15 customer support representatives, and they're each saving like 5 minutes a day, maybe 10 minutes a day. And it added up really fast to have this like one solution to a really obvious pain point and be able to like just solve it. It was really satisfying. It's possibly the best writing I did for that company because, well, there were other issues. So, anything else? You could go see if there's leftover pizza. So why don't obvious pain points trigger other people's alertness that this is maybe a stupid way to do this? So the customer support reps were perfectly clear that this was a stupid way to do this. They were not unclear that, they didn't know that you could make a PDF that would do it, but they're like, this is dumb. And they said that to their manager, and their manager said, but that's your job. And they said that to other people, and they said, yeah, but you're customer service reps, and we don't pay you very much, and also you might have cooties. And there was just this dismissal of these, and it was 12 women, of these women's experience because their time was so much less valuable than developer time. Because it didn't matter that we were being inefficient, because the total inefficiency, the 100 minutes a day, still didn't add up to like 10 minutes of developer time. So why would anyone care? Like, quality of life wasn't even something that entered into anybody's mind. Like, it was really angering to me that we let people continue to do inefficient, miserable things at jobs because their time is not as highly paid as ours. And on a related note, why is it I have to get authorizations to spend $100 and I can call a meeting for 10 people for an hour and nobody questions it? Like, I want to work someplace that has a meeting ticker and everybody swipes their badge when they come in, and when the meeting starts, the minute-by-minute dollar amount of this meeting just shows on the screen. Like, this is how much it is costing you to be a pontificating jerk, by the way. It's like $20 a minute, whatever it is. Because it makes me so angry to have inefficient meetings. Yeah.
I want to make a comment on the other question about pain points.
Mm-hmm.
Not for the CS thing, but one of the other things that I run into in terms of user pain point for software is that the person who wrote that piece of software doesn't want to admit they did a bad job.
That is an excellent point.
For that reason, they are highly resistant to any idea that why things done.
Yeah, so he says that the person who originally wrote it in the stupid way, which was probably not stupid when they wrote it, is really resistant to changing it because it's an implication that they did a bad job. So, there we go. So I think that's really true, and I think this is a thing that Agile ought to be addressing. Like, the thing that Agile ought to be doing is making us really well cross-trained because we work on different projects. The thing that actually happens is we have tiny little fast-moving silos. Like, we only know how to work on one or two things in our development organization. And we're not doing the idealized cross-training. And I have a lot of things to say about Agile as an ideal as opposed to Agile as implemented everywhere I've ever worked, because no plan survives contact with the enemy. But I think one of the things to do is to take people off projects and say, hey, you did a great job on that. Now go work on this. Now go learn something new. It's great. You're going to learn something new. Oh, no, he changed it, the thing that you wrote, because, it's been a while since you wrote it, and we had some new user requests come in, and here's how we're moving forward. And it's not yours anymore. I pried it from your cold little fingers. So how do you test documentation for people who are really devoted to paper documentation and are not doing super interactive work? And the question was, do you stand over them? And the answer is yes. If you cannot see what people are doing with your documentation, like virtually by monitoring them, then what you have to do is make it part of your user testing. Like, hi, we're going to do user testing on this interface, and the way you're going to user test it is by using the documentation. If the documentation does not get you through the interface, the documentation has failed the test. We must treat documentation like code. We have to check it in to a source repository so it doesn't get lost. We have to test it every time we release, and we have to release it at the same time as code, or it's no good. Because there is nothing that is innately more or less valuable between some lines of words that happen to have more parentheses in them and some lines of words that happen to have more bullet points in them. They're the same thing, and if we treat them that way, then we're going to have both better code and better documentation. If you put more parentheses in your documentation, will you get paid more for it? It depends on the semicolons. I don't use semicolons in my documentation because I'm really bad at grammar. So that's why I'm not a developer. I'm scared of semicolons. I was frightened by a semicolon as a small child. All right. Anything else? Yeah. So I really like the Google Analytics feature, and I haven't used a lot of other analytics packages, but I really like the Google Analytics feature that does a workflow, like a user flow. So you can pick out, like, people land on the page, and then they go to the next page, and then what do they do from there? Having that sort of branching tree river thing really tells me how people are using the documentation, and sometimes I'm super surprised. One of the last projects I worked on, it turns out that the page that people used most was not like how to set up your video settings so that you can do classes, and it wasn't how to get paid, it was how to correctly title case capitalize headings, because it was the thing nobody could remember how to do. They could remember how to get paid, like that stuck in their head pretty well, but the rules for whether or not you capitalize the and, that did not stick in their head. And so they kept visiting that page. And so the first thing I did was beef that page up. And the second thing I did was find a developer who could write a translator, like just a transformer, so that if you entered a sentence, it probabilistically determined how you wanted to capitalize that. Because there are rules, they vary a little bit, but you can get pretty close. Does that answer the question? All right, you all look very answered. You can find me later. I have shiny cards. Oh, wait, one more. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question is, using the bell curve and trying to determine whether you have one user who complains a lot about one thing or many users who complain a little about the same thing. And, right, roughly? And one way you can do that is take out a noisy user. Like, there are some people you will never satisfy. You're not going to be happy. And also, they've written in to tell you that there are no periods at the end of any of your bullet points. I had a boss recently who looked at my shiny web HTML5 web page help and said, shouldn't it be in Times New Roman? And I'm like, that's not the way we're doing that anymore since it's not 1962. I didn't actually say that part. I thought it really loudly. But so that was a noisy data point, and I eliminated it. So there's this problem that I have when I'm getting reviews, and in open source we call it bike shedding. And so the story, do you guys know this? Oh, bike shedding, it's a great phrase. So you are asked to review the safety and structural components of a nuclear power plant. It's super important work. It's super intimidating. You're like, if I screw this up, it'll be the next Chernobyl. But I'm one of 20 people who's been asked to review this. And so rather than take the risk of screwing this up, I'm going to look at the bike shed that you have planned for the parking lot, and I'm going to say you've painted it the wrong color. I think it should actually be green to symbolize the greenness of both nuclear power and biking to work. And so you have this bitter argument about whether it should be blue to match the sky or green because of the greenness of nuclear power, and nobody has looked at the reactor schematics. And people have this need to contribute. If you ask them to review, they're like, I really need to contribute to this discussion, but I don't have anything I feel is valuable to say, so I'm going to pick on your fonts. And I find this a super frustrating thing. But so you need to figure out if the people in your bell curve are actually having trouble executing their tasks, or if they're bike shedding you. Yeah. Right. It's super easy if you don't know how to write about something to write about something small and approachable instead of the overall conceptual. Conceptual topics are the hardest to write. They take me the longest. It can take me 3 days to write 500 pages of conceptual topic because I have to understand everything and then distill it. So it's really a problem when you ask contributors to document something, getting them to document actual workflow. And one of the things I do for this is use user testing. Like, all right, let's take that and see how that goes when somebody tries to enter their PIN number. That's not working out super well. How do you think we should fix that? All right, so now I'm getting the high sign. If you want to get my cool card or talk to me more about amazing phrases that the open source world has for ways to waste time, you should come find me afterwards. I also have gold plating and yak shaving and font fondling. Yeah. All right. Thank you all very much.